Hello and welcome to the Reef Dork Extra channel. Now, if you've ever used Hanna Alkalinity checkers, you may have noticed that the reagents come with a use-by date. But I've always wondered, does it really matter if you go past that use-by date? And if you do, how much are the test results going to be out by? Well, today we're going to find out because I have 3 bottles of alkalinity reagent, one that is over a year out of date and that I opened about 18 months ago, a second bottle that is a year out of date and is completely unopened, and a third that is brand new, still in date and 6 months away from its expiry date. We're going to get stuck straight into the test then, and to make sure I use the exact same amount of water every time, I measured it out using this high precision set of scales, and I measured out the exact same amount of water for every single vial. Now when I filled the first vial, I held it up to my eye to make sure it was at the level Hanna recommends. Then I weighed it and made sure every single tube weighed the exact same amount. And the sample weight came out at 9.86 grams, which I managed to get pretty much exactly the same across all 3 test vials. Now I've tried to follow the exact same process with all of these tests, so I started by wiping off fingerprints on every single vial with a microfiber cloth. I then shook the reagent bottle roughly the same amount every single time and measured out 1 milliliter of reagent. Now I started with a brand new unopened reagent that still had 6 months left before its expiry date, because that's likely to be the most accurate, and I wanted to get a baseline against which to measure the other tests. I measured out exactly 1 milliliter of reagent. Now I didn't do this by weight, I just used a syringe because you can get it so fine and so precisely controlled that I thought it was pretty unlikely there was going to be any significant weight difference simply by using the syringe. I then inverted the vial 5 times to make sure the reagent was mixed in, wiped it off again with a microfiber cloth, and put it back in to get the final result. The brand new unopened reagent came in at 124 parts per million, which is a DKH of 6.9. And at this point I should point out that if you ever do get a Hanna Alkalinity checker, make sure you don't get the version with parts per million, because you have to do the conversion to DKH every single time. The second reagent I tested was the unopened reagent that was still a year out of date. Now I've always thought that as long as the reagent is sealed and hasn't been exposed to air, there's no reason it should go off just after an arbitrary period of time. So I was interested to see how this one stacked up against the brand new reagent. I followed the exact same protocol as before, and this gave a result of 114 parts per million, which is a DKH of 6.4. So I lost about half a DKH of resolution, despite the fact that that reagent had been sealed the whole time I'd owned it, and I only opened it on the day I did this test. Which tells me that that expiry date is no joke, and it will still expire even if it's been kept airtight. The final test was on the old reagent that I'd had open for well over a year, probably around 18 months, and it was a year past its sell-by date. Again, I followed the exact same test procedure, and I was really excited to see how much further away from the correct result this old opened reagent was. But to my surprise, it came in at 116 parts per million, which is a DKH of 6.5, which is more or less exactly the same as the sealed but 1 year out of date reagent, and still only half a DKH away from the unopened brand new sample. So what did I learn from that experiment then? Well, it is quite a small sample size of only 2 expired reagents, but I did learn that you will get a less accurate reading if you use expired Hanna Alkalinity reagents. With that being said, given both of the expired reagents I used were over a year out of their date, and one of them had been opened and exposed to air for 18 months, I was pretty impressed that the only difference was half a DKH. Now to me that is a totally acceptable difference, and I don't really care if my tank is at 6.5 or 7 DKH, or more realistically 9 or 9.5 DKH. So my main takeaway from this is that if I'm desperately keen to have an exact accurate result, then I will always make sure I use in-date alkalinity reagents. But ultimately I'm not going to be throwing away my expired alkalinity reagents from here on in, because I don't really mind if my alkalinity is half a DKH away from what I think it is. Now I'd be really interested to hear from you guys if you've ever bought a new reagent and done a test to compare an old one against a brand new one, so let me know what your results were in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like, and if you want more content like this, make sure you subscribe to the Reef Dork Extra channel, and I'll catch you next time.